Assalamu alaikum viewers, welcome to my channel. In this video I'll show you the making of a very beautiful party dress for a 5-year girl, and you can make it for any age. It's very beautiful. I'm using this tissue fabric for this dress, and this is lemon color, and I'm using 3.5 meters of this fabric, and we'll attach piping at the bottom of the frills. And for this I'm using this steeping color. It is also tissue fabric, and it's 1.5 meters that will be used, right? And the silk fabric for lining the tissue, and it is 1.75 meters that I'm using it now. First of all, I'll tell you the measurements of the skirt on a paper, so you better understand. The full length of the skirt we want is 26 inches. We divide this 26 into 6 layers because we'll make layers of the fabric, right? So the silk fabric will be equal to the full length of the skirt. So for example, one broad line is equal to one layer of the silk, and we divide 26 into 6 layers. So this is one layer. From here we'll attach the second layer. Each layer would be 4 inches long. So these are 6 layers, and each layer is 4 inches long, and 6 fours are 24. So it is 24. It is 2 inches less than the full length of the skirt we want, and we'll adjust the length later on. I'll tell you. So for now, these are the 6 layers. Each is 4 inches long, but the tissue fabric would be double this length because the tissue layers will overlap with each other. So one layer is equal to 2 broad lines, right? Because it is 8 inches long, it's double the silk layer, right, in length. So each tissue layer is 8 inches long. So these are 6 layers, and each one is 8 inches long. Now we'll change the length of first and last layer of silk fabric a little bit. For the first layer we'll reduce 1.5 inches in length. So reducing 1.5 from 4 inches we get 2.5, and likewise we'll reduce 1.5 from the tissue as well, so it is 6.5. So first layer will be 2.5 inches long, first layer of silk, and the tissue will be 6.5 inches long. Okay, the other layers will overlap with each other, but the first layer will be all visible, and the last layer would be equal to the tissue fabric because the tissue fabric is very sheer fabric. So it should be lined with the silk fabric, right, till end. So the last layer of silk fabric would be equal to the tissue layer, so it is 8 inches long, right? So we reduce 1.5 from the first layer, and the last layer will be equal to the tissue fabric. So these are the two changes we are making in the length. And now when we'll cut the silk fabric, we will add 1 inch seam allowance to the silk layers only, but the tissue fabric will be cut in the same measurements because we don't need seam allowance in the tissue fabric because we'll attach piping at the bottom, and the bottom of the each layer of the tissue fabric won't be folded, so we don't need any seam allowance in the tissue layers. But for the silk layers we'll add 1 inch seam allowance while cutting. So for the first layer we'll cut at 3.5 inches because we need 2.5 inch long, and each other layer would be 5 inches long when we'll cut it, and the last layer would be 9 inches long, right? So we'll cut at these marks. And for the tissue we won't add seam allowance to it. We'll cut all the layers in the same measurement. Now the width of the strip would be equal to the amount of gathers we want in our frock. So if you want more gathers, you need more strips of fabric, but the minimum amount of strips I'm using here is, for the first layer I'll use 1 strip of fabric. My fabric is 58 inches wide, right? For the second layer I'll use 1.5 strips of tissue fabric. For the third and fourth layer I'll use 2 strips. For the fifth layer I'll use 2.5 strips, and for the last layer I'll use 3 strips 8 inches long, right? So these are the number of strips, and in total I need 1 strip which is 6.5 inches long, and 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 and 11 strips which will be 8 inches long. So I'll cut tissue fabric with these measurements. Now we'll cut silk and then the tissue fabric. So first of all, fold the fabric widthwise. My fabric is 58 inches wide. I folded it widthwise, and now we'll move the fabric from one corner to the other side to make a triangle. Our width measurement is 22 inches. 1/4 of this is 5.5. So we'll place the measuring tape here where 5.5 lies, and it's almost at this point. We'll mark here and measure it from the corner. It is almost 6.5 to 7 inches. So we'll mark at 7 inches from that corner. This is for the waist. So I've marked for the waist at 7 inches from the corner. And then we'll mark for the layers of the silk fabric as we decided before. So for the first I marked at 10.5, adding 7 inch of the waist to it, and then at a distance of 5 inches, and for the last I added 9 inches. So we'll mark from the corner. So we'll add 7 inches to every length. When we'll cut the waist part, we'll get our desired length of the layers, right? So we'll mark like this, move the measuring tape like this, and mark at the points we decided. Now we'll cut at all these marks. For the last layer, we'll have to add a joint because these are 4 layers and these are 2 layers only, right? So we need a joint here. We'll use the fabric which we are left with. So we'll trace the same pattern, keeping 1 inch seam allowance at the top only. Now we'll attach the joint in place, and the cutting of the skirt is done. And now for the tissue fabric, as we have decided, the first layer would be 6.5 inches long. So I have folded the fabric like this and marked at 6.5 inches for the first, and at a distance of 8 inches for all the 11 strips we need. So it is very easy to cut the strips, right? So I have cut at those marks and I got 11 strips 8 inches long and 1 strip 6.5 inches long, right? And in the same way, we'll cut the teeping tissue fabric. We need 3 inches long strips of this fabric because we'll attach at the bottom of these layers, and the number of strips would be equal to the number of lemon strips, right? So I have cut 12 strips of the pink fabric, and these are 3 inches long. So we'll attach it at the bottom of each layer. So this is the first layer of lemon fabric. Take 1 strip of pink fabric, place it at the wrong side of the lemon fabric at the bottom, and stitch in place here. So we place it at the wrong side and stitch there first, and then we'll fold it to the right side. And I have stitched it at the bottom, as you can see here. Now the wrong side is done. When we'll fold it to the right side. Now we'll fold it to the right side like this and fold a 1/2 inch inside and top stitch here. So it will be finished from on the wrong side as well as from the right side. And where we are supposed to join the strips, because we are using 1.5, 2 or 3 strips for one layer, then we'll attach the strip first, or you can also attach piping first and then join the strips, right? So I'm attaching the piping to all the strips first. So simply we'll fold it to the right side as I showed you and fold the margin inside and top stitch. So I've attached the piping to all the layers, as you can see here. Now we'll join the tissue fabric with the silk fabric, right? As we decided. For the first layer, we'll use 1 strip of tissue. For the second layer, we'll use 1.5. For the third and fourth, we'll use 2 strips of these tissue fabric pieces. And for the fifth layer, we'll use 2.5. And for the last layer, we'll use 3 strips of fabric tissue, right? So this is the first layer of silk fabric and 1 strip of tissue fabric. We'll gather the tissue fabric down to the width of the silk fabric, right? So starting from one end, we'll gather it up to the other end, right? So for the first layer, I have gathered the tissue fabric by using a running stitch, and this is only for the first layer because the rest of the layers are not that much wider, right? So we'll just pleat them down but for the first layer I have gathered it with the running stitch. If you want more frills, if you want more gathers, then you need to add more strips, and then in that case you can gather the fabric with the running stitch. Okay, but I have done gathers for the first layer only. For the rest of the layers, I'll simply pleat the tissue fabric down. So I've done the first layer. Now in the same way, we'll take the second layer of silk fabric and 1.5 strip of the tissue, and so on for all the other layers. So I have attached the tissue fabric as we decided to all the layers of the silk fabric. Now we'll join all the layers together. So for that, first of all, we'll take first 2 layers, join them together, and then add each layer one by one. So these are the first 2 layers. We'll attach the top of the second layer to the bottom of the first layer and matching the right sides together. So simply we'll match the right side together like this, and starting from one end, we'll stitch it to the other end. So it's very easy to pin the fabric first. I have pinned it, and now I'll stitch it very easily. So I have stitched it, as you can see here. This is the bottom. This is how it looks from the right side. The margin is on the wrong side, right? Now we'll attach the third layer. So simply the top of the third layer to the bottom of the second layer, match the right sides together, pin them in place so it will be easier to stitch. So I have pinned it first, as you can see, and now I'll stitch it. Now add the fourth layer and the top of the fourth to the bottom of the third layer, matching the right sides together. I'll show you in machine. So this is the top of the fourth layer. To this, I'll match the bottom of the third layer. The right sides are facing each other, and simply stitch from one side, one corner or one end to the other end. We don't need to gather at all because the silk layers are cut from one piece of fabric, as you saw. I'm just stretching it a little bit, a very little bit, so it reaches to the end. So it's here. In the same way, we'll attach all the layers one by one. So now we'll add the fifth layer, the top of fifth to the bottom of the fourth. Now the top of the sixth to the bottom of the fifth layer. In the same way. This is how it is looking from the wrong side, and this is the right side. It's looking really very nice. All the silk layers are stitched. We only need to hem the last layer. So we'll hem the bottom, fold it once, stitch all the way around, and then fold it again and stitch from one end to the other. So I've hemmed the bottom. Now stitch all the layers of one side in place and all the layers of the other side in place. So I've stitched, as you can see here, all are fixed in place. Now we'll simply join the right sides together like this and stitch the side seam. And while stitching the side seam, we'll leave a 5 to 6 inch opening at the top for the zip to go in. So I've stitched it. This would be the center back, and I left 4, 5 or 6 inches opening at the top for the zipper to go in. We'll simply fold it inside and it will be finished, right? So the skirt is done. Now we'll get the bodice ready and attach it to the skirt. For the bodice, I took 2 pieces of lining fabric, 11 inches long, and the front part is 15 inches wide and the back part is 16 inches wide, and we'll keep the extra fabric at the center back for the seam allowance when we'll attach the zipper, right? Now we'll mark for half of shoulder first, and I'm marking at 5.5 inches. From that point, we'll mark for the armhole. It's half of armhole round. I'm marking at 6 inches. Extend these 2 points like this. At this place we'll mark for the chest. 1/4 of the chest is marked, so I'm marking at 6 inches, and for the waist we'll mark at 5.5 inches. It is 1/4 of our waist, right? And at 1 inches I have marked for the cutting, and from that point we'll mark for the back armhole first and a bit deeper for the front armhole, as you can see. Now for the neck width I'm marking at 3.5 inches. We'll keep the neckline broad, right? And for the neck depth I'm marking at 3 inches. Join these 2 points in a round shape. The front and the back neckline would be in the same shape. Now we'll cut at the neckline and back armhole first. Separate the back bodies and we'll cut for the front armhole. So the bodice is ready. Now we'll cut tissue and silk fabric in the same pattern. So I've cut the silk fabric and the tissue fabric using this lining bodies as the pattern in the same way, right? For now we'll separate the lining pieces and we'll place the tissue fabric on the right side of the silk fabric and stitch it from all sides to make it one piece. We'll do the same for the back part. Stitch the tissue fabric with the silk fabric from all sides to make it one piece. So as you can see, I've stitched it from all sides. Now it's one piece. It's easy to handle now. Now we'll place the lining on the right side, both on the front and the back part, and we'll attach it from the armhole and neckline only, both for the front and the back part. So I have stitched at the neckline and the armhole, and for the back part I made 2 stitch lines at the center, as you can see here. We'll cut from the middle. So I cut it from the middle so it is easier to cut the center after attaching the lining. Now we'll make a few notches at the armhole and the neckline, and we'll turn the right side out. And after turning the right side out, we'll press it very nicely so all the seams are set in place. So I have pressed the back bodies, as you can see. Now we'll insert it in the front bodies, but keep in mind that the front body is not turned right side out, right? So we'll use a safety pin at the shoulder and insert this part in the front bodies. The lining should be facing the lining and the main bodies should be facing the main bodies. So insert the shoulder in, adjust it in place, and stitch here and keeping the shoulder slope, right? We'll do the same for the other side. Use a safety pin. The lining would be facing the lining, as you can see here, and simply stitch at the shoulder. Adjust the shoulder first. So I've stitched at the shoulder. Now we'll turn the right side out, giving a few notches first, right? And now you can see the shoulder is done. It's very nicely finished from the wrong as well as from the right side. Now we'll press the front bodies as well. So I've pressed it very nicely. Now join the right sides together like this and stitch the sides. For stitching the side, we'll simply open it, join the main bodies to the main bodies and lining to the lining like this, and stitch here. So I've stitched the sides and now it is very nicely finished from inside and the outside, as you can see. Now we'll stitch the lining from the bottom as well. Now our bodice is done. We'll attach the tissue patch at the neckline in the end after attaching it to the skirt. So this is our skirt, and I finished this opening as well, folded to the wrong side and top stitch, right? Now we'll attach it to the bodice. So this is equal to the waist measurement. We'll simply join the right sides together pin the zip opening in the skirt and the bodice, the other end as well, and stitch them both at the waist. If the skirt is wider, we'll simply pleat it a few times. So I've stitched it in place, as you can see here. Now the bodice is attached to the skirt. It's looking like this from the front, and this is the back part. We'll attach a zip at this opening. Simply place the zip under this opening and top stitch. After attaching the zip, we'll attach that tissue patch at the neckline. For this, we'll first measure the length of this neckline from the center back, going through the front neckline and to the center back where we started. It's 24 inches. We'll take 10-inch wider strips. So I've taken 2 strips of tissue fabric. Both are 34 inches wide and 10 inches long. Fold the fabric pieces like this and stitch at one side here. After stitching at this side, we'll bring this seam at the center like this and now stitch at the side. So this joint will not be visible from the neckline, right? So I've stitched at the sides as well. Now we'll unstitch a 3/4 inch from the center. So I've unstitched it, as you can see here. From this opening, we'll turn the right sides out. From one side and from the other as well. So we have turned the right side out from that opening. And that opening can be hand stitched later on. Now we'll pleat the one end of this patch and attach it to the center back at one side and top stitch it. This patch will be joined throughout the neckline, and the other end will also be pleated in the same way and stitched at the other side. So I've top stitched it, as you can see. Now the center of this patch will also be pleated down and attached to the center front. So I've marked the center front first and pin it here. So the tissue patch is equally divided on both sides. Now pleat again at a distance of 4 to 5 inches and pin here. We'll pleat this tissue patch at intervals and pin here. Then we'll hand stitch it, and I used beads to wrap these pleats. So I've attached the beads, as you can see. So it's very simple, it's looking very nice. And the pleats should not be on the shoulder, so it's 3 to 4 inches down the shoulder point, right? So the neckline is looking very nice. Now for the back part, we'll attach a bow tie at the waist. So for this, we'll get the bow ready. For the bow, I took a piece of pink tissue fabric. It's 12 inches long and 24 inches wide. It's only one piece. We'll fold it like this and stitch at the bottom here. I've stitched it at the bottom. Now we'll turn the right side out and press it very nicely. So I've pressed it and the stitch is at the bottom, right? Now join the ends together and place one end inside the other like this and stitch in place. So I've stitched the both ends. Now they are joined. We'll simply pleat at the center and wrap it with a strip of tissue fabric, and we'll attach 3 or 4 beads on that strip as well. The bow will be ready. We can attach it with a glue gun or hand stitch it at the center back. So this is the final look of the dress, and it's looking very nice. Must try it. I've used a petticoat under this skirt, and the video tutorial on petticoat inshallah will be uploaded very soon. And if you don't want to use the petticoat, you can attach a layer of lining and can attached to it at the lower half only, right? Can will be attached at the lower half of the lining only, and it will also look nicer with that if you don't use the petticoat. And this is the look with the petticoat. I have used it under this skirt, right? And if you like the video, thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe if you have not subscribed yet, and press the bell icon so you will get notification on every new upload. And thank you so much for watching, and Allah Hafiz till the next video.